We welcome you to the Priscilla R. Tyson Cultural Arts Center for our conversations and coffee on this 21st day of August, 2025. I'm Ellen O'Shaughnessy, coordinator of the program. We celebrate today our guest artist, Pat Smith. We celebrate her art as her quilting adventure, she calls it. Pat, we're so grateful to you for these quilts of your beautiful adventure. You began sewing when you took home economics in the 7th grade and continued to take sewing in school. For example, Pat, as an undergraduate at Ohio State, studied home economics and was a teacher at Newark High School for 5 years. During that time, Pat made all her own clothes, upholstered some furniture, made draperies, but she shares she never quilted. After earning a Master of Business Administration from Ohio University, Pat began to work in business and continued, however, to sew. She made lots of suits and blouses, especially for the high-tech companies in those days that had strict dress codes. Pat could accommodate them with her art of sewing. Pat told Scott, her husband, when they married, that Pat could not move into his house until he had a room in the garage for her car, a closet for her clothes, and a place for her sewing machine. Scott, stand up there. You did it. Bravo.
The house was all filled up. Clarify.
So as we know, after all these years, Pat and Scott worked it out, huh? Pat's sister was an avid quilter. Chris. Ah, yay. How wonderful, an inspiration. One of her sons, one of your sons, who is now an art teacher, was an active participant in helping his mother choose fabric and design. So Pat and Scott had 3 children. And when their children were grown, Pat was anxious to seriously sew again. So what did she do? She called her sister, Chris, and said, I want to sew, but I don't care if I never make another garment again. And of course, Chris knew exactly what she would do. What did you do?
Told her to take a quilting course. I told her to take a quilting course.
Yay. All right, so Pat took up quilting. Wonderful. And because of Chris, Pat joined a quilt art guild and became a member of 2Bs and started going to quilt shows and quilt retreats. A few years later, Pat retired from her job and her quilting intensified. Sewing's been a major hobby and creative outlet of hers for over 60 years. Pat shares her belief that we all need to create, whether it be gardening, cooking, decorating, model trains, and many more ways. Fiber art has always been Pat's space. She shares that there are several different quilting types: traditional quilts, modern quilts, art quilts. It took Pat a while to land on what she really wanted to focus on. And of course, this continues to evolve. Today, she's going to show some of the quilts, and look at all of them, amazing, that she has made, and as well as photos of them. She used different techniques which bring about specific results. If anyone would like to take up quilting, Pat says, the sky is the limit. So Pat, thank you for being with us today and inspiring us to be creative with your beautiful quilts. And where they take you, the sky is the limit. Thank you.
Yes, I came a couple of months ago because Ellen asked me to speak and said she wanted me to talk about the spiritual aspects of quilting and how that might relate to my spiritual journey. I thought, that'll take about 4 minutes, and then what will I do with the other 56? And I think she's already summed that up in the introduction. We do have a need to be creative, and we do it with woodworking or with flowers or with cooking or any number of things, but it's just kind of a human need to have a creative outlet. And mine has always been sewing. I've been a sewist for a long time, as she said. I used to be a seamstress, but of course we changed that word. And for a while we used sewer, but sewer is spelled exactly like sewer, so we didn't like that one. So sewist is the word, and I'm a sewist. This is my hobby, and quilting is what I've taken up since I stopped making Halloween costumes for my kids. And I don't make any garments anymore. But I did want to talk about the construction techniques simply because I came a couple months ago and I was trying to figure out how to organize this, and there was a weaver who had some things on display downstairs. She said, I'm all about technique. And I thought, okay, that's it. I'll talk about techniques. A lot of times I'll tell people I'm a quilter. They think, they don't know what that is. They think I must have some great big structure in my living room that's holding some frame, holding a big quilt, and I'm sitting there going like this. Or a lot of people say, I guess you got all your dad's old ties and, you know, a bunch of old stuff that you're putting together. Yesterday, someone asked me if I'd make a quilt out of her deceased dog's clothing. I don't know why the dog had all these clothes. She said, well, I could, you know, get another dog, but these are her clothes. I had a dog 8 years. I don't think she has any clothes. But anyway, I declined. But a quilter, the way I quilt is to use a good quality cotton. And I've never made a t-shirt quilt. If you want to make that, I'll be glad to talk to you about some thoughts I might have on it. But that's kind of what a quilter is. People think it's pretty crazy to take a perfectly good piece of fabric and chop it up into little pieces and then sew it back together. And that's what we do. So I've got these divided into some things that I've kind of observed about quilting, and some of these are just techniques I made up. A lot of us have seen this block quilt. A block is just a piece of a quilt. Oh, let me back up a little. Quilts come in there's 3 parts to a quilt. And if you want a quilt, I don't want you to be held back thinking, oh my gosh, I got to put this together. It's got a front, which we call a top, and a back, which we call a back, and batting in between. Here's a little piece of batting. So that goes together, and then those 3 things need to be sewn together. And that can kind of hang people up, but I'd recommend you do 2 things. Get it in a community. Get it in a community of other quilters, so that when it comes time to quilt something, you can say, what in the heck am I going to do about this? And you'll get a lot of good help. And also, just focus on the front. Just focus on that top. And if you take a course at Quilt Beginnings or any other place, they'll just tell you about the top, and they'll send you on your way. So the top's an important part. And as you do a top, here's some blocks. I didn't bring that because it's too big. But it's pretty easy to see where the block starts. And here's another one. this was my second quilt ever. So these quilts, as you can see, these blocks are diagonal. That's called on the point, rather than just lined up straight. And then each block has some other little elements to it, which sort of give you another block, secondary block in there. But these are all just blocks. This is a block, this is a block. So that's just block, block, block. This is a quilt I made for my son. All of the ones I'm showing you are quilts that I've made, except for 1.5, and I'll show you that. But made this for my son and daughter-in-law when they got married. You can see that I finished it during COVID, and we're all wearing masks when we took the picture. But each one of the guests signed that little center part. There's pens that can work on a quilt, on a piece of fabric. And so I asked them to please leave a message for the bride and groom. Some of them were so gross that I couldn't include them in the quilt. But, I don't know if I'd do it again, you know, because I was the mother of the groom running around grabbing people. Hey, have you signed this quilt? You know, leave me alone, lady. But that's a quilt that I made for them. As you can see, it has an honored place in their home. Their dogs get to sleep on it. So those are blocks. Here's another one. This is, for me, this is a very unusual quilt because it's patchy. I almost never make a patchy quilt with all kinds of different colors, and I very seldom use a white background, and I almost never use this cutesy stuff, but I made this quilt. So here are the blocks. And I have a sashing in between, which is in the white, and then the corner of the sashing has color in it. So this is another block, block, block. Here's one that, in some cases I had to ask people, please send me a picture of the quilt I gave you. This was in a camping situation. But you can see those blocks, and you can see the sashing in between. My son accused me of making psychedelic quilts, but these are just blocks. This is called fractured, and you just, I can't remember exactly how it's done, but there's a book on it, and you just make a couple and sew them together, and it gives that fractured look.
The blocks sewn together?
Pardon me?
Is each block the elements in that block sewn together?
Yes. Yes. It was a picture of a flower, and I cut it up and put it back together just a little bit off. I think, Chris, you've made these. Do you take two? Do you have to have two of everything?
2 or 3.
2 or 3. Yeah.
Kind of real tiny.
Yeah, you cut them tiny, and then it's a tiny little seam. If any of you have sewn before, a seam allowance on clothing anyway, it used to be 5/8 inch. It's a 1/4 inch standard on a quilt. So it's pretty tiny already, but these are even tinier for the seam allowance. I'm going to put these down here so that I can reach things. Okay. Oh. This is a small quilt I made because I won a door prize of a little stack of 2.5 inch squares. So I was obligated to make a quilt. And so I put it together and didn't do anything with it. One time my daughter was in town. She went to a baby shower. She was on her way, and I said, I want to go, because I knew the mother and I knew the grandmother. So I invited myself to this baby shower and reached up and got this quilt and gave it to the mother. Didn't really look like a baby, but it was a good size. It was the right size for a baby quilt. Okay, so we've seen block, 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 and that's real nice. Yeah.
When you made that quilt, and I've been counting the layers of it, I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Where do you start and how do you accomplish the end of a square?
You generally start in the center.
Like,
So you'd have, and here again, I follow directions. I don't really do art quilts, and I've got one example of an art quilt, but I just follow directions. So this would be, sometimes you can't see a seam if you got two of the same fabric together. But this is a square, see?
oh, yeah, that's what I was wondering.
And this is a square, and then that's a little
So you
triangle.
do all this first, and then this, and you work your way
Yeah,
out.
you build out. Wouldn't you say you usually build out? Sometimes it's different. This was done in a class called Midnight Madness, and the quilt beginnings that used to be on East Broad, we would go there at 5 o'clock Saturday night. And prior to that, they would say, you need 2.5 yards of dark and a yard of light and so much medium, and then cut it into 2.5-inch strips and then cut those into square. So we'd show up with all these little cut things. And then they would give us the first step. And when most of us had that done, they would give us the second step. And it was always a mystery. This was a mystery. I didn't know what it would look like when I went. And then we would sew till midnight and then go home. And we never had the thing done at that point, but we knew what the block was going to look like. So you just went step by step. So I did find that a lot of times you can take a block, put it next to another block, and kind of camouflage the fact that those are two blocks. This is a quilt I made for my son years ago. He's a musician. So there's a bunch of instruments in here. And here is the block, right here. And here's another one. So they all have the same elements. They all have this long strip, and they all have this size of thing. And of course, I used different fabrics in different spots. They all have a little frame around them. But when you put them all together and you don't have a sashing in between, they just kind of look sort of random. And you can work for hours trying to get a good random look. This is another one. I put it in here even though it was just a plain block-to-block thing, but I can't figure out where those blocks are now, and I did it. This was another one of those Midnight Madness quilts. And it's real fun to be in a room where everybody's making the same quilt, everybody's using different fabric and different colors. You can walk around and see what they are. This is kind of indicative of the way I go. I don't ever use solids. I think this might have been a solid white, but I don't use solids. I don't like the way they look. But I don't usually use fabrics that have too much of a print to them. They often look solid, especially from a distance. As I made this presentation, I realized I kind of make the same thing. And I also realized I almost never go without turquoise in there somewhere. Okay, this is the cover on a French door. And here again, here's a block. Here's a block, here's a block, here's a block. Same elements in each block. Obviously, limited number of fabrics, and yet to look at it, it's just kind of a bit, crazy quilt.
When you do this, you actually use a sewing machine?
I do. I and
Pieces you hand?
no, I don't do anything by hand except the back of the binding, which is the very end thing. But I piece what we call piece by machine, which is putting those pieces together. And I often quilt by machine or ask someone else to quilt by machine. And I've gotten better at what we call free motion quilt. I quilted this one, but I only have a couple of stitches that I can do that way. And there are people who invest in huge machines called long arm quilting machines. They're only $50,000 or $60,000, and they take up the length of this room, and people make their living on them. So
Well, let's see
they
the
will
back
quilt
of
for
that
you.
one. Oh, the back of that one is gorgeous.
yeah, I'd encourage you to make a pretty back. I mean, it doesn't cost you any more to have a pretty back than an ugly one. And then when he shuts his door, he's got these French doors. He shuts the door, and he at least gets a pretty view of it.
Could we pass that around?
Oh yeah. Okay, this lives in my camper. It's big, and I don't want to unfurl it, but it's a real good example of where's the block. So I have a block which has a big square and a little square and 2 rectangles in it. Each block has those elements. Obviously, I have very limited number of fabrics in here. But then when you put them together, it can just look like a nice hodgepodge.
Do you find certain materials that you do like to use, or?
Well, I use 100% cotton, always. And I very often use what's called batik, which I think everything in that is batik. Comes from Bali or... Yeah, and it's very finely woven. I know when we were making masks, I made about 300 masks, and I used batik because it's very, very finely woven.
Pat, how do you keep the consistency of the movement of the... You're at a sewing machine, and you are sewing this way, and you're consistent all the way down. How do you do it?
I make a block, then I make another block, then I have a pile of blocks. Then, and if you're a quilter, you can get a shirt that says, "I still play with blocks." So, yeah, I'm not sure. Okay, I sew these 2 together, right here.
Going on the back side, right?
Well, I put the 2 fabrics right sides together. Yeah, and then put that on, and then this would go on, and then this one. I mean,
Design wall? Do you use the design wall?
I have a design wall, which is
That's helpful.
some drywall. I think it's drywall. Anyway, no, it's the foam that goes behind, yeah. And then I have flannel on top, and it just leans against the wall. So once I get my blocks, but that doesn't have anything to do with sewing, that's just how I arrange them. And then
You're with the machine. You're doing it on the machine, the sewing machine.
yeah, usually I've got a little piece like this to sew.
Oh,
It's not like I'm turning corners and,
yeah.
yeah, I'm just doing it.
Stitch, I think what she's asking, the stitch on there looks like it's a design.
Oh, the quilting. Okay, yeah, this is the quilting. Yes, this is what's called a darning foot, I guess. And you drop your feed dog. And I don't want to scare anybody off. If you want to try this, don't worry about the quilting part. But you drop your feed dog, and you can move your fabric around. And I can do that as long as it isn't enormous. I can go in this design, and I can also go in a circle, but I can't do anything else.
As a non-quilter, I had to learn what the term quilting meant. You haven't really explained it. Quilting is just the putting together of the final piece, what she's talking about now.
Yeah.
Everything else isn't really called quilting except by usage.
If you look at a quilt in a display, you will see designed by, pieced by, quilted by. And very seldom is it one person. So the quilting is actually putting that sandwich together so that it holds.
Is that sewing just random, the brown?
Yeah, it's just random. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you look real close, you see that I had a tiny stitch followed by a big stitch, you know, and I had a jagged thing, and I wasn't supposed to, but yeah, nobody's looking that close. But that's another, where's the block? My friend Mike died, and her daughters decided that RB should take her fabric. And I made this quilt with Mike's fabric. Here again, these are all blocks, and the block includes this black, which is around the green square. But if you look at it, it doesn't look too block, 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 but it really is. And that's where's the block. If you ever find yourself in front of a quilt, you're supposed to be admiring it, but you're really kind of bored, which happens to me sometimes, you can play where's the block. You can say, I wonder where that block is, because it's probably in there, almost always. Okay, talk about blocks. I heard about this concept from a long-arm quilter. She liked to make these quilts called One Block Wonder. They really should be called One Fabric Wonder because they're made with one fabric. And it's usually got a pattern, flowers, whatever. And then you stack up your fabric 6-fold, exactly one on top of one another. So the tip of a flower is going to be right on top of the tip of the flower, on top of the tip of the flower. And you put a pin down in there and you get it all lined up. And then you cut that into a 60-degree triangle, and then you make a bunch of hexagons. This is one that was a flowered fabric and ended up like that. This one hangs on my wall in my sewing room. And this is what no, turn it around. This is what I started with. This was the fabric that I cut all up. And then this is what I ended up with. So it's not always this monochromatic, but I kind of liked this look. But I've made several. What?
I want to gaze at that a little more. It's amazing.
I've made several of these One Block Wonders. I don't know why we have two. Oh. This fabric was given to me, and I thought it might make an interesting One Block Wonder. This was some kind of safari animals, and it ended up like that. This is one of my favorite quilts. It's not quite a One Block Wonder because it's not a hexagon, it's an octagon. And the fabric was 2 rows of border. So you had 2 rows of border as the length of fabric, and then the pattern had 2 of these big ones and a bunch of little ones, and then some halves, and then some quarters. Yeah, really interesting. There were several of us at the quilt shop one day. Some of us had gone to lunch together and then went there. Some other folks had a class, and they all went. So we saw each other at this quilt shop. And Ed, our friend Ed, he and I got exactly the same fabric and the same pattern. To my knowledge, he hasn't made his. I was hoping we could share them together because, you see, it's going to be different depending on where you set that. Even if it's a ½ inch over, it's going to look different. But that was the pattern for that.
Those things at the bottom of the picture.
Oh, that's my son's instrument that he's building. What is it called?
It's a electronic dulcimer.
Electronic dulcimer.
To do with sewing.
No, that's just hanging in his sewing room. or his music room, sorry. And the one I showed you with the music things, that's his wall, because it's a nice big room and has a great big opening, and it's in the basement and it gets cold. So he put that quilt up as the wall door.
Is this Ray?
Ray.
Oh, wonderful.
Ray.
Follows his father's pattern as a guitarist and singer, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Wonderful.
Ray's our middle one. Okay, I'm finishing up this quilt. I needed to show a picture of, she is my biggest helper. She helps me on every project, whether I need it or not. She helped me put this presentation together because she knows a lot about computers too. But I was doing the binding on that. I did have that one quilted professionally, and actually I had her do it. Rather than have a computer make the design, I had her custom do that one.
What's Kitty's name?
Smokey. This is a quilt that I don't think I made. Scott swears I did. It looks like something I would make, especially because the turquoise and everything, but I don't remember it, so I just show it quickly. It is a good example of a one-block wonder.
Like it's 3D though.
Yeah, those blocks. And I made a couple of those blocks in this one. See, I do know how to make those blocks, but I don't remember making that. But that's okay, because it's kind of out of sight, out of mind for me. I give you a quilt, it's gone. This is a quilt. This one wasn't done. I can tell it wasn't quite done when I took this picture. But this was made with panels. And I had to do 7 panels so that I could line 6 of them up accurately and cut them together. And then I had the 7th so that I could keep the guys intact. And you could see that I had those wolves in there. So that was made with a panel. I was going to put it up on the living room wall, but Scott didn't want any wolves in the living room. And I was working on it at a retreat. We take retreats a lot. And my friend Joan kept saying, "Oh, that's a great quilt. I love that quilt. You can give it to me." I said, "Yeah, here." So she has that quilt. So that leads me into panels. And panels are just a length of fabric. Normally, you'd buy fabric by the yard. You just buy it by the panel. So maybe it's 24 inches or 30 or whatever a panel is. This guy lives in our hallway. And I had this gold fabric and never knew quite what to do with it. So I found him, and I thought, so I put a inner border with this black, and then an outer border with the gold. And to celebrate, I used a gold thread to quilt it. And, yeah. Is it fabric? Well, you can pass it around if you want. I don't care. Yeah.
Took it up for Halloween, but then we couldn't take it down.
Well, I really like... Yeah, I like skeletons. I like Day of the Dead, and, yeah.
Skeleton of fabric you found?
Yeah, that was the panel. The panel was this guy. And you will find that there's no consistency in panels. See how this is way over here? You've got to square off your quilt. Even if your panel's all skewed up, you've got to square it off. And so these were not equal distance from my corners, because panels are sometimes like that. As a matter of fact, usually. But they are fun, and this was a Native American panel I got in someplace, Arizona or something. Here's a Native American woman asleep, and there's a bear asleep right here. So I just put on a blue inner border, black border, and then some stuff next to the binding.
This skeleton is so graceful.
Oh, yeah,
Usually-
he's from Day of the Dead. He's a happy guy.
Oh,
Yeah.
and the gold that you have intertwined. You know, it usually when you see a skeleton, you go, ugh, but not this one.
Not in our house.
Not this one.
a sticker. We were in Paducah, Kentucky, and it says resist, rebel. It has a skeleton. It says Badass Quilters Association. And I had to get it. I said, it has all the elements. This is a baby quilt I made for my friend's first grandson. And all I did was add some festive border here, made some block things in the border. And you'll see baby quilts are a real good use of panels, because baby quilts are going to be washed and dried a whole lot, and you don't have any extra seams in there. I've seen this same combination of zebra, elephant, tiger, or lion, and giraffe a lot. Everybody's always happy. Nobody's trying to eat each other or anything. And so this guy, the guy who got this quilt, a couple years later got a brother. And his brother got this quilt. And all I did was take a panel, and these are coordinating fabrics. So I just put them on the border. And I didn't like this quilt at all because it was just so busy. There was just so much going on. But I gave it to him, and the mother sent me this picture. And here the 2-year-old was fascinated with the alligator and the fish and all that. I said, I'm so glad you sent me that, because nothing's too busy for a 2-year-old. And he liked his brother's quilt a lot. There's that same combo of animals. I gave this away a couple weeks ago. All I did was add that pink border with I made those squares in the border and gave it. And someone who was who did not go to that shower, texted me. She said, "Oh, I understand. Your quilt was just gorgeous. Everybody was carrying on." And of course, it was just a panel. But I gave it to the mom.
Find all these great fabrics.
All fabric stores. There's really two things. There's making quilts and there's acquiring fabric. And you have to balance it somehow. But yeah, quilt shops will have a lot of panels.
And you mentioned 2 Bs.
Joanne shut down.
A lot of quilters didn't use Joanne for fabric so much. I miss it a lot because I always got batting and different things there. But there's 2 quilt shops left in town. One is Red Rooster on 161, and one is Quilt Beginnings off of Sawmill. And that's kind of it for quilt fabrics.
You made
Yeah.
reference in your bio to 2 Bs.
A bee is just a group of quilters who want to get together.
Oh.
And I belong to one up we meet at the Dublin Rec Center. And someone who belonged to the rec center died and left a bunch of fabric, and of course they gave it to us. We're working on our 4th quilt just from that crazy fabric. So yeah, and then I'm in another bee with Chris, and we meet in each other's homes. This I gave as a baby quilt. This was a baby quilt. You see that coordinating fabric? Here again, we got that combination of animals, everybody getting along. This is a panel in the center, and personally, I think every cat has this attitude of, I am queen. And this is a bunch of coordinating fabrics that go with that panel. I actually bought this as a kit, or I could have just bought the different pieces of fabric. And then the kit gave me some instructions on how to put it together. And I quilted this a little differently because I'm getting a little better. And like I put big circles here and then tiny ones here. And so, of course, that same wandering stitch is in there also. Oh, here's a panel. Yeah, this was a panel. These pots, I think that's upside down in the picture, but I'll hold it right side up. These are Southwestern theme, and these pots were just on a panel with some beige background, which of course I don't go for beige background that much. So I cut it up, and I had this fabric, I had the orange, and I bought this coordinating fabric. So I kind of had to create this look, and I had to fill in a lot of black in between because they weren't consistent in their spacing the way I wanted to do it. So I had to fill in. And you see, sometimes you get creative with the back also. So those are panels that I've worked with, and don't be afraid of panels. You might feel like you're kind of cheating, especially if people carry on and on about how great it is, but you know, it's okay. Bargello is a kind of quilt. I wish I had one here, but I've made 3, and it gives you the sense of movement, and that's just in the way that the fabric is positioned. It's all, yeah, it's just kind of like it's moving. And it's all a bunch of vertical columns, some of which are more narrow than others. And then as you see, I quilted it with a straight stitch using you got to use a walking presser foot. And they're easy to come by. I've got a 1951 machine that I travel with, and I bought a walking foot for it. It walks, you know how the feed dog kind of pulls the fabric from underneath? It also kind of pulls it from the top also. And when you got all these layers, especially with batting in there, you got to have help pulling that baby through. So that was my first Bargello. Then I made this. This is a big quilt. It taller than me. And here again, you get some movement, and I quilted it with a straight line. My friend Ezra saw it. I said, I'll make you a quilt. What would you like? Well, she liked that one. So at our guild, we have an amazing library. I mean, just every kind of book. And so I got a Bargello book. I said, hey, Ezra, how about this one? She thought it was good. I don't know why, but I never checked what size it was. And she wanted a wall quilt. So I was working on it. I did a lot of it in our camper. And it's just enormous. Here she is with it. And I said, you're going to have to put this on your bed. It's way too big for the... She goes, oh, no, she wanted it on the wall. So I've hung it on her wall in 3 different places. And she likes it, but that's...
How long did it take you to make something that size?
That one was 4 or 5 months, probably. I don't always remember. I try not to gauge it, but yeah. Sometimes I look back on a year and I've finished 3 or 4, and others not so many.
Work on one at a time?
Kind of one at a time. The question is, do I work on them one at a time? Yeah, I try to do that because if I lose interest, it's like a book, you know, I forget all the characters and everything else. So I try to do one at a time, but those things don't always work out. I've got a miscellaneous category here just because I had a few. Okay, we were camping here, but you see my tiny machine, and this is a bag I made when I first started quilting. I didn't realize then there's tons and tons of bag patterns. I don't know why you'd need a bag pattern, but my kids gave me this cat fabric, and so I built them out, and they weren't all the same size seam, so I had to build them out a little bit. And then my pockets in there are cats. So, and I had learned years ago how to make a strap like that, and I had never tried it, so I tried it. No, I can't pull a machine in that. My little machine, here's the case for it. Yeah, it's a little featherweight.
On your featherweight?
No, I do not quilt on my featherweight. I only stitch. The feed dog can't drop. I guess you can cover it, and I just don't go through all that. When I go to a retreat, I only have my featherweight. When I camp, I only have my featherweight, and so I just make sure I got something to do that will accommodate that. But it's a workhorse. It's good. Here's a reason why community is good. I wouldn't have made a crazy quilt like this. Our president had a challenge one year. You got an envelope, and she went to the hardware and got those little cards for paint. And he had 3 shades of paint in your little card. And so here was my, you didn't get to choose your color, and these were my 3 colors I had to stick with. I was allowed one other fabric. My sister-in-law, who's a beautiful art quilter, she said, oh, you need this bird fabric. So this was a quilt I wouldn't have made otherwise. And it's kind of in miscellaneous because these are blocks, but they didn't line up because they're different sizes and shapes, so I had to fill in with background. And I had a quilt. I sent this away to be quilted at the time. Now I could do this myself, but at the time I couldn't.
How do you offer these to people for sale? Where do you?
Oh, I've never sold a quilt. No, I'm not interested in selling a quilt. Well,
Do you give them away?
yeah.
Oh, you're
I don't
amazing.
have that many in my house because I give them away. My daughter's good at saying, Mom, what are you going to do with that purple quilt? So she's got a bunch, and sometimes at Christmas I say, anybody want this? Or like in Ezra's case, I say, I'll make you a quilt.
Any new friends?
I didn't hear that. What was that? What'd she say?
Oh,
that's wonderful.
so that's a miscellaneous. This one I wish I had to show. It's a Celtic kind of thing. And the bad thing is, all of these little green things, I've got 3 or 4 different shades of green in there, and I don't think you can really tell. I don't know that I would have done it quite like that again, but.
Oh,
And
beautiful.
the original pattern didn't have these bottom corners, just the tops. So I added those corners. I wanted them at the bottom.
So the top left and the bottom right look darker. Is that just the shading?
Yeah, that's some kind of shadow. He took the picture. This is kind of me delving into art quilt a little bit. This was a course I took at Quilt Beginnings. And Quilt Beginnings has a lot of courses. If you want beginning quilting, they'll say, here's a quilt you're going to learn to make, and you can go make it. But that was some applique, and that hangs, I think, in my daughter's home somewhere. I did not make this quilt. This is the one I didn't make. But this is an amazing example of an art quilt. It lives at the Quilt Museum in Paducah, Kentucky, and that's all fabric. The picture doesn't do it justice, but it's a really amazing quilt. And there's an art quilt guild called Art Quilt Alliance. And if you're interested in art quilting and you want to make some friends there, I would recommend you look into it because, there's some great people and they're doing amazing work. And sometimes they'll display here too. Always liked kaleidoscope as a kid. I liked, the concept of it. And there's a couple of different people who will teach you how to make kaleidoscope. Ricky Timms is kind of a big shot in the quilt world. Yeah. I don't have a kaleidoscope quilt here, but I've made a couple. I made this for my son, and you make strips that you sew strips of fabric together, wide, skinny, different colors. Then you take, it's usually made with freezer paper. Quilters use freezer paper because it has a little wax on it. You can press it down and it'll stick to your fabric, but it won't really leave any residue or anything. So he starts with a 17-inch square and talks about 30-degree angle and stuff like that. And you have these little pieces that you put on multiple times in the exact same spot, and then sew them together, and you honestly do not know what it's going to look like when you open it up. I mean, you always think you can, but you sew two pieces together, you open them, and you live with that. But he has some kind of light show thing he makes lights dance around on that quilt. My daughter wanted one for her bedspread. And, these are people up there holding. This is a big quilt. And so I had to take that 17-inch square and make it a lot bigger. And then the pieces around the border are just chunks that were left over that I made a border out of. And that's the look that she wanted. When I make a bedspread, I like it to go to the floor. If you make it the size that they tell you to make a quilt, one person rolls over and the other person's cold. So I like to make it all the way down. And the person who quilted this, she's up in Mansfield, she said, now I know the largest quilt that I can accommodate. She had never known that, and she said, now I know. Okay, I'm real interested in the 3D effect, and you just do it. Of course, that's a flat quilt. You just do it with different shades of fabric. And here again, these are quilts that I've given to people, and they had to send me a picture. I made this quilt in 2 weeks because I was going to see a guy at a wedding. I had not given him a wedding present. Then I was going to see him again a couple of years later, and I said, I got to give him a quilt. So from the moment that fabric hit my door, I ordered it. I saw him in 2 weeks, and it's a pretty big quilt. It's taller than I am. But this is a half size, and the full size is very dramatic. I mean, it sits on a bed, and it just looks very, very deep. This one hangs in our dining room. And here again, it's just the shading of the fabric. It was supposed to just have 3 colors, the brown, purple, turquoise, and I stuck that teal in there trying to get like a renegade block, and I didn't think it worked that well because I didn't have enough contrast with the turquoise, but that's a 3D. And this one, is this the way it goes? Yeah. This one is just a top. I got a few things to repair on this, and then it needs to be, I'm waiting on some fabric because I want to put a little bit of a border on it. But this is what the top, and this is done with all 60-degree triangles. So you see in here, it's just what feels like a million triangles, all sewn together. And then you make the long strips, and then you sew the long strips together. And you think it's kind of mindless activity, but you got to really watch that you put the right triangle in there. So that's my delving into 3D. Paper piecing is a way to quilt, or to make quilts, and rather than put two pieces of fabric together, you put two pieces of fabric with a piece of paper on top, and you sew that paper. Here's an example of it. Looks like this on one side, and it looks like this on the other. So if you want to, you can pass that around. It's really hard to explain, but it's not hard to do. And there's a person named Carol Doak who she makes a lot of paper. It's kind of a newsprint grade, and I print onto it. But one of the things about paper piecing, you can get very, very tiny. These are all paper pieced, and these are all Carol Doak patterns. So you can get real small. You see this? You couldn't do that unless you had a foundation of some kind that you were working on. It just wouldn't, fabric isn't that cooperative.
The numbers that are on the paper are each individual piece.
Yeah, you start out with the 1, and then you put 2 down, and you sew it. Then you press 2 back. Then you trim it, get it ready for 3. Then you put 3 down. Then you sew it, turn back. As she says, trim, sew, press, teaspoon, TSP. But you can get real tiny, and I like that. I think it's fun. I do a lot of paper piecing. This is another example. See, it'd be tough to get that scoopy thing in the point. So you can do real fine things. This is a real big quilt, and I think you saw that bow. I have one of the bows here. So I just took that bow, and I had it electronic, so I just sized it differently, printed it onto that special paper, and made a bunch of different bows. Then I arranged them and filled in between. Is it time for me to stop?
Pat, this was extraordinary. You said the sky was the limit. You've taken us beyond the skies into the universe. It's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
Oh, it was wonderful. You know, I've invited Pat on several occasions, and she's always so modest. Well, I don't know. I will never hesitate for the next event. And Scott, thank you so much for your support of this beautiful spouse of yours, huh? Oh. And you call us to creativity. Let's all be about it.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
20 minutes a day.
Just think about the top. Don't worry about anything else.
Oh, yeah, see, you want to stay here. Oh, thank you. Oh, there's so many. We want to open up. And Stacy, thank you. Uh-huh.